Hey everyone, Future here, and welcome to the attic, and welcome to another pedal video. So this is the Hologram Microcosm, and unless you've been living under a stone or you're new to guitar gear, you have seen this pedal before. This is basically the quintessential influencer pedal, which you will see on any major channel. So considering me being a very minor channel, I thought I had to get one. That's actually not the entire story. There's a lot more to this pedal I want to talk to you about, and specifically I want to talk a little bit about the European perspective of getting this pedal, because this is a pretty expensive pedal, and when you factor in the tax and the costs to send this to the EU, this pedal will cost you $600. So that's a lot of money. It will actually get you quite a few decent synths at that price point. You can even get cheaper multi-effects for that. And it's only $300 cheaper than my JDXA, which is pretty mind-blowing for this little box. So why did I pay that much for just one pedal, and was it actually worth it? Let's talk about that. Now, before we talk about the microcosm, I just wanted to quickly talk a little bit about the channel, because I am a self-funded individual and this gear is extremely expensive, as noted in the intro. I have decided to, from now on, include a PayPal link in my video descriptions, so you can, if you like this content, help me out a little bit to get more gear to talk about. Right now I'm looking into an Empress Effect Zoya, because I really like to try to create this pedal board or something similar in a much smaller form factor. So that would be a very interesting challenge. If that's something you'd like to see, just anything will help me. Even just a single dollar goes toward this goal. And if that's not achievable, I want to try to get a multi-effects pedal to see how it stacks up. So that's just a little message from the sponsor, me, myself and I. And let's move on with the microcosm and let's see if it's worth the price of admission. Now, just to emphasize, this video will not be a big demo of this pedal, because I believe there's already so many videos out there. I want to keep it strictly utilitarian in this video. If you want to see a very good demo of this pedal, I would recommend Mark Johnston's video on the pedal, which I will link in the description down below. I will do a demo video at a later point, so this will mostly be talking and showing some things off. Speaking of showing things off, as you can see, the pedal is currently off because we have some stuff to talk about before we even turn it on. And the first thing I want to talk a little bit about is the included power supply. So included in the box is this little power adapter. It's a pretty standard issue. It actually has a screw fitting, so you can change the pins. It's pretty alright. I was a bit disappointed with the way it fits into a socket, which I will show a photo of. So that isn't ideal. It looks a little bit dinky. But it does work. So let's power on the unit and let's talk a little bit about the unit itself. Okay, so with the hologram turned on, the microcosm turned on, we can take a look at the controls. Now I will try to go over this as quickly as I can. First off, you have 4 main categories of effects: micro loops, granules, glitch and multi-delay. And these are separated into different groups. In total, you'll have 11 groups with 4 effects per group. So for instance, we can move up to mosaic, and this is the first mosaic effect, the second, third and fourth. And then you move on to sequences 1, 2, 3 and 4, etc, etc. You can change this scrolling behavior if you want to. I have set it so that you can move up and down quite easily. Aside from the pre-made settings, you also get some user presets, so you can store your settings. So this is 1 full bank, 2 full banks, 3 banks, 4 banks, and then you move back into mosaic. Every effect can be reversed by pressing the button, and it will show on the screen which direction it's going in. So this is reversed, and that's forward. Very nice visual feedback. Pretty nice scroll wheel. Let's move on to all the buttons. Now every effect has two parameters you can actually influence. So most of the algorithm is hidden and unknown. But there's two parameters you can always change. That's activity and repeats. In general, activity is the busyness of the effect, and repeats is the duration of the effect. It's a little bit more in depth than that, but in general, that's the common rule. So we can actually demonstrate it a little bit by turning on the looper. So with little activity and little repeats, we don't get much effect. Also a good time to show reverse. And as with any effect, you also get a mix. Full wet, full dry, very basic stuff. You can set the level of the loop. So no loop obviously turns off the sound. So that's quite neat. So let's stop that loop for a quick second. Next to activity, quite nice visual feedback as well. You have the shape. The shape sets the envelope shape of the grains. Still going. We ran out of grains. Okay, so basically the window can be either square, saw up, triangle, or saw down, and this will affect the sound of the grains. So let's get our little loop going again. So now the sound kind of swells. And that kind of fades out. It's very dependent on the effect how noticeable this is, but it helps you to shape it a little bit. If you want a little bit more tech, you can use this setting or this setting, and if you want a little more of a ramp into the sound, you can use the saw up or the triangle shape. Let's keep it here. Let's talk about the next setting, which is filter. Quite an alright filter, nothing too spectacular, can be handy to take out some of the highs. Now personally I would have liked to see the option to flip the filter, because quite often with reverby sounds you will get too much mud in the low end, so actually filtering out the low end is much more interesting than filtering out the high end. I think that's a missed opportunity here. Still kind of nice to have, but yeah, would have been cool if you could flip it around. The repeat, we already talked about it. Then we have space, which is the reverb. Reverb is basically what makes this thing come to life. And like I said, we have the loop level, so if we turn it off, the loop goes off. Because the loop is pre-effects, the effects keep going for a little bit until they run out of steam, and then we get quietness. Now every control has a secondary control, which is quite nice, accept activity, and those are labeled beneath the main functionality of the knob. So let's talk about the first two. You can shift by holding the shift button and then move the knob to move that parameter. So let's get the loop back in. Okay, cool. This button, the shape button, will give you mod frequency. As you can see, we get a visible feedback again. And this is quite nice. You can see the mod def makes it brighter. And now if we change the speed, you can more easily see it flicker. Well, I hope it comes across on camera. It goes insanely deep and insanely fast for really wobbly sounds. More likely you're going to use it for a little bit of a vibe. So the space control has a reverb setting underneath it, so you have a platey reverb. Slightly larger reverb. A very large hall reverb. And at the far end you get the fourth reverb, which is an ambient reverb, which is absolutely massive. Let me actually stop the loop. It's a very big reverb. Fade in time for the loop, not that interesting to talk about really. And here we get the time. Time is interesting. Right now we're clocked to MIDI, so we actually get a MIDI clock from the computer. So if I turn on the metronome, you will actually hear that. And the subdivisions will show underneath in subdivision mode. So right now we're at 1, so it flickers at the same time. We can speed it up. Subdivision flickers twice as fast as the tempo, 4 times, 8 times, or half time and quarter time. And this will directly influence the delay and reverb of the effects. So let's bring in the loop again. Now, aside from being able to change the tempo of the effects, you can also change the tempo of the loop simply by holding Shift and moving the speed knob. So the one thing that's very interesting about this is that you can actually hear that the bit rate it records in is pretty high, because if you slow it down a lot, you still get a very clear sound with no clicking or weirdness. So it samples in a, or it loops in a pretty high quality, which is very nice. And the visual feedback is pretty sweet as well. Not just slowing it down, but also showing it in different colors. So now we have some orange and purple in here. Now we get orange. Now we have the regular speed, we get blue. Speed it up, and we get full purple. So that's a very nice little feature. Let's stop the loop again. You can also set it to tempo mode, in which case you can freely move the tempo around, going from slow to fast. The only problem now is because I'm MIDI clocked, it doesn't grab that, because the transport is still running. If I were to stop the transport, you can actually set it. But as long as we have MIDI clock going, it will sync to the MIDI clock. Now the pedal has two operational modes. It has the effect mode, which is the mode we are in now. This is effect mode. In this mode, your pedals will be tap tempo, you will have a bypass, and you have a hold button, which is pretty neat. And for that I actually need a guitar, or a bass rather. Noisy. And it will basically hold this indefinitely until we press the button again. This is actually a nice moment to talk about two more controls that we didn't talk about yet. That's the resonance of the filter, and that's basically shift and the filter knob. Low resonance, high resonance. So let's do full resonance, so let's do sweep. It actually slightly overdrives the interface. So it steps a little bit. It's pretty good. You're definitely not going to get acid out of this, but it's a nice to have. And we also have the effect volume, which changes the volume of the effect. And if we press hold, we release the sound. And this will take a little while because we have a little bit of a buffer here. There we go. So that's the controls when you're not in looper mode. Once you get into looper mode, which is this little button, the controls will be play, record, dub. You will have a bypass still, and you will have a stop, and if you hold it, an erase button. Looping has a few functions. You can loop pre-effect or post-effect, quantize to the measures. You can set a looper only mode, and a burst mode, which I haven't used yet, honestly. You can also reverse the loop, which is pretty cool. So let's boot up the loop again. And this allows you to build up textures pretty quickly by just slowing stuff down, slowing the loop down. Looper also allows for overdubbing. You can delete one overdub. It's not the most impressive as a looper. It also doesn't have a built-in metronome or anything like that, so you're dependent on the outside clock for your looping needs. Still, it's a nice to have feature, and it allows just a little bit of extra functionality here, so it's never bad, especially in a pedal that's kind of focused towards doing these sort of soundscapey things. It's nice to have the option. So that's the controls. Pretty basic stuff overall. Let's move into something a little bit more exciting, well, in a sense. And let's talk a little bit about MIDI capabilities of this pedal, because basically any parameter here can be MIDI controlled, which does come with one little caveat, which you may have already spotted, is that even with the double controls, things will snap. So let me, for instance, demonstrate. If I set the reverb to 4, I hope that shows up, and I turn the time all the way down, and I try to change the reverb again, it will jump straight to 1, and this will happen with any parameter. If you modulate it, it will just jump from one value to the other value, which can be a little bit annoying if you're, for instance, trying to change the resonance. So let's say I want to change the resonance to here. If I move the knob again while in filter mode, it will jump the filter all the way down to this point before it moves back up if I move the dial up. And this makes it a little bit annoying at times and a little bit frustrating, because it's very easy to get values to jump around. It would have been cool if there was like a latch function. Downside of latch function, of course, being that it would need an indicator LED to show you how far from latch you are. Still think that would have been a nice functionality to have, just to give you a little bit more control and have a little bit less jumping of values. But let's talk about MIDI, shall we? Okay, so the project I just showed you, or the demo I just showed you with the controls, had a little loop going. I actually recorded that loop using MIDI. So what I have going on here is a track which sends out to the hologram. And it basically has a send for looper record, which is actually now triggered. And it has a send for looper stop. So if we move it back here, we disengage the looper. The loop is now empty, so I actually can't play in a loop because there is no loop. Now what I can do is I can start my metronome, and I can actually, oh, it's very annoying with one hand. There we go. Start the metronome. So that's pretty nice. And we can also send MIDI commands to the unit. So let's actually throw in some MIDI here. So we're going to hardware output. I'm not quite sure which channel I use, but I think it's 9. Yep, 9. So let's create a new file here. Now the interesting thing is that I don't know all the MIDI commands by head, so I'm going to have to grab the manual for a second. Here we go, very long manual. Would highly recommend reading it because there's a lot of interesting stuff in here. But this is the part I'm interested in, is the PCs, the program changes. So we should be able to send program changes from Reaper as well. So let's have a little bit of fun with it. Let this be a program change. So let me get up my cheat sheet again. So let's do a ARP setting here, which can be program free. And then we can set a program change here. Let's do 21. As you can see, I'm placing them one step before the beat. And I will demonstrate in a second why. 37. 25. So let's do this little loop. Go. Cool. Let's turn on the metronome. As you can see, it actually switches program. Let's move them to the ones or on beats. Let's toss that one out. So now they are perfectly on beat. Okay, so what you can see there is that it takes a little bit of time for the pedal to actually load in the effect. So using this switching live while a sound is going is going to require a little bit of thinking ahead and tinkering of things. Still though, very cool that you can actually change these settings. And furthermore, it's not just these settings you can change. You can actually target almost any parameter here with MIDI, which is pretty cool. So time to repeats, mod frequency, can actually copy and save presets, hold sampler, and change the banks. So it's very nice. And we also have MIDI through, which can be nice if you have a device after the pedal you want to target as well. So you also get some global settings, which tell you something about if the pedal works in mono or stereo, or the kind of signal you're sending in, or the MIDI channels, which is pretty nice. And you also have a hold style, either a toggle or a monetary switch. Again, this is stuff that's in the manual, so check out the manual if you're interested in that sort of stuff. So let's talk a little bit about what this pedal is, what it can do, and whether or not you should buy it. So that was quite a journey. So much of a journey I actually changed clothes in between, because this took a couple of days to set up. Quite a long video, and now the part that everyone is actually waiting for is the Microcosm worth the $600 price tag, or €600 price tag. And this is going to depend greatly on the problem you're trying to solve, really. Because it is a great pedal with a lot of functionality. You get a bunch of time-based effects, and you get a few controls on top of that. Now, the granularity of the controls for me is a little bit lacking. You only have really the repeats and the activity knobs to really change the behavior. Well, and the programs, of course. So that was a little bit disappointing in a sense, because I do like to have a little bit more control. The Microcosm is more a pedal which kind of does its own thing, and you are there to join it on that journey, which is a very pleasant journey. And quite often it does quite fun things, but every now and then it behaves a little bit like a toddler, where it does its own thing, and no matter how hard you try to get it back into control, it just keeps doing whatever it wants to do. So that makes it a little bit of a struggle at times, where you just want to have a specific effect and it will just do whatever. That's also the flip side, because that can be exactly the kind of tool you want. A tool which can generate ideas by doing things you don't particularly expect to happen. So whether or not this pedal is worth the money for you, that depends. I would like to suggest some alternative pedals while we're at it, and some pedals I've actually looked at while researching the Microcosm. And that's Chase Bliss, has two pedals actually. It's the Habit and the Mood, which are both time-based, glitchy, buffery, loopy pedals. Both feature MIDI in, as far as I know, and they have much more granular control over the algorithms. You also have the Red Panda Particle, which I think also has MIDI in, and also does the buffery, loopy kind of stuttery things. And then you could also consider the Zoya by Empress Effects, which is a pedal that can be basically anything you want it to be, with the potential downside of being less hands-on in control. Now, because we don't really have many physical stores here in my city, and let alone stores that sell this kind of gear, I don't have any access to this kind of gear, so I'm greatly dependent on demo videos to determine which kind of gear I want to buy. So the reason I went with Microcosm is because, well, there's a lot of great demos for it, of course. It also has the tempo sync over MIDI, which is cool. And it has full MIDI control, which is pretty cool, although, as you have seen, it takes a little while to change algorithms, so your mileage will depend on how quickly you need to change those algorithms. And it also has that built-in reverb, which is really good in creating soundscapes. And I would say that's really the strong point of this pedal. Even though the hands-on control is limited, there is a very good possibility it will create a nice sound. If you are looking for control, I would not recommend the Microcosm, because again, your control options are very limited. You have quite a bit of control over the sound after the algorithm, but the actual algorithm, you only have 2 knobs, while the time knob to do something. The looper, although a nice addition and can be useful for people that just want to layer it underneath something. So for instance, you want to play some guitar and you want to loop something over that, works fine for that purpose. If this is your looper in your entire setup, I'm not quite sure this is the best looper out there. I would say the electro-harmonics I have on the floor here, the 22500, is a much more capable looper. But it's in there, so that's cool. As far as this pedal and things I would like to say to Hologram, because I think it's always good to leave a little bit of feedback for developers so they can take that to the next meeting. It would be really cool if the filter actually did high pass and low pass. Because right now, like I said earlier in the video, you only have the low pass, which means you can't filter out low frequencies, which cause rumble and muddiness in reverbs. And since this is a very reverby pedal, when it boils down to it, not having that high pass function is kind of a missed opportunity, I think. Another thing I think could be very cool was a dedicated stutter hold. By this I mean you have the hold, which holds the last bit of sound, last bit of sustain, which is very cool. But it would be cool if you could set it so that if you hold, for instance, I don't know, the bypass pedal, it will do a interrupt effect or a stutter effect. That would make it a little bit more useful for that use case. Aside from that, very capable pedal. If you're on the fence of buying it because you are maybe concerned about the quality of the pedal, don't be. It's very solid, functions very well, so that's all good. If you're looking for a specific stutter effect or a time-based buffer pedal, maybe look into the Habit or the Red Panda Particle, because that was the role I wanted to fulfill with the Microcosm, and I have to be honest, I am a little bit disappointed with this pedal for that role. Now, as a soundscapey ambient sort of fills the room with noises and is very pleasant to play in the dark with your guitar, this pedal is very nice. So it will stay with me for now until I see an opportunity to maybe replace it with something which is a little bit more dedicated to the stutter, even though it is still a very brilliant pedal to have. So that's the Microcosm by Hologram. If you have any questions, leave them down below. As I said in the beginning, I will leave down a link to a very nice demo video of this pedal with guitar, which is just perfect. And that's it for now. Have a great day.